Ontario waterfalls are at imminent risk of being taken over and reduced to a trickle for the financial gain of a handful of corporations that were in the right place at the right time. We're in the position to take control of these opportunities. There are about 87 waterfalls, actually I have the applications right here as a matter of fact, that are in the process right now of being considered for hydro development. According to my calculations, which could be off by $1 billion one way or the other, there's about $10 billion in revenue that will be generated by our waterfalls and paid to these corporations. And in my view, that's not sustainable because future generations don't get a chance to enjoy the benefit of these opportunities. My name is Jeff Moore. I'm with Trillium Energy Alliance. We're a non-profit corporation in the business of mobilizing communities so they can own renewable energy opportunities for the benefit of the community. This is not for the financial gain of the members. This is for the betterment of the community. So, for instance, we have these waterfalls in Ontario that could produce electricity. That electricity would then be sold to the public grid at the going rate under something called a feed-in tariff program. That's a power purchase program developed by the province to incentivize generation of electricity from renewable sources. Ontarians provide the cash flow for that program every time we turn on the lights. We pay for that procurement through our electricity bill. And as you know, we own a lot of Crown land. One number I hear is approximately 87% of Ontario is Crown land. And we have potentially 2,000 waterfalls that the industry has got their eyes on for development, for hydro projects. So we have Crown land that could site wind turbines and solar panels. And we have waterfalls which, let's face it, we cherish those waterfalls because they're great for tourism values. They're great for aesthetic values, for their recreational values. They have a whole host of values, and we have to treat them very carefully. So what I'm saying is we're providing the cash flow, we're providing the land. We have a public grid that we built over the past 100 years. We own that grid. We have to live with the impacts of these developments when they go up. You might have heard there's some social friction, or I'll call it, around renewable energy. Particularly wind turbines seem to be particularly problematic, but there is a lot of social friction around large-scale solar farms as well. And there's social friction definitely to do with local hydro opportunities. So, but yet we hear from the provincial government that we need to attract investment to develop these opportunities. And my argument is that Ontarians are already making a significant investment. We need to find a way to get a better return on that investment. And I would say a social return on investment. So what happened was, about 7 years ago, I was the president of the Property Owners Association in Bala, Ontario. We were an organization that was pretty happy doing our annual regatta and our corn roasts and our pig roasts and so on and so forth. We were a social organization. When a corporation came to our community, one of these corporations, and wanted to take over our local waterfall, which we treasured dearly, our community was not given the opportunity to be engaged. We weren't mobilized. We didn't really understand the implications. Renewable energy and privatization was a fairly new thing. I would argue that the industry and the Ministry of Natural Resources were scandalously close, is a term I would like to use, when they created the rules that allowed this to happen. And they knew or ought to have known that communities ought to have been engaged and should have been given the opportunity to develop the local opportunity for themselves. But yet, we weren't. And so, all along, I felt there was a less destructive way of developing this water resource opportunity in our community. The company refused to consider it, and I wanted to prove that it was technically and economically feasible to do something that was less destructive. And the way to go about doing that, there was some money for technical and economic feasibility studies through a government program where I could hire an engineer to prove that. But I didn't have site control, so I couldn't get access to that funding. But in hopes that I might get it, I formed Ontario's first non-profit renewable energy generating co-op for the purpose of assessing local opportunities. Because the one in our community was not the only one. There were other opportunities out there. So this is in Muskoka. And within Muskoka, we've identified potentially $100 million worth of capital projects that could produce $500 million in revenue. And that's a significant amount of revenue. And I know that the private sector is eyeing those opportunities and wants to move forward with them. So we put together a business plan and identified what are the hurdles to moving this forward. And because there are hurdles, and most of them revolve around access to affordable capital. But we put these, we basically bundled up what the hurdles are, and I've been after the government for months now to implement something that I've called a Community Energy Act, which would prioritize all of these opportunities so that community enterprises, and let me just back up what a community enterprise is. In Ontario, electricity generation is a proponent, new development of electricity opportunities is a proponent-driven process. So in order for the community to be engaged and involved, the community has to be the proponent. So in order to do that, they form a co-op. And there's two types of co-ops. There's co-ops with share capital, where members of the community benefit, and then there's co-ops without share capital, where by law, the surplus revenues have to be donated for the well-being of the community. So it's not for the financial gain of the members. And I call that a community enterprise, sort of following along the lines of a large, small, medium, large enterprise. It's a community enterprise. It's for the community. The added benefit is that it gives the community a voice, so that sensible projects can move forward. And ones that are maybe too damaging to the community can maybe be put on the back burner, or at least assessed in other ways. So, recognizing that we had developed what was essentially a new model, because to my knowledge there wasn't anything else being done in that space. I had heard a lot about stuff being done in Denmark and Germany, but I understand that that's selling shares, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So, but recognizing that we had something there, and these 87 were just the first. There are literally hundreds more waterfalls that will be taken over, and hundreds and hundreds of acres of crown land that would be taken over. These are capable of producing 10 billion. I would argue that the marketplace on our crown land is something in the $100 billion range. So I wanted to take what we learned in Muskoka and share it with other communities, and that's how I came to form Trillium Energy Alliance. We are not the developer. We are in the business of mobilizing communities. We give them the roadmap that they need to follow so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And how am I doing for time, Frank?
Well, I just want to give people a chance to questions.
Okay, so just to wrap up then, I'm asking anyone who will help me sign a petition for a Community Energy Act. No matter who the government is, in 6 months' time or a year's time, if we have an election, we want to be able to go to them and say, we've got a lot of people that think this is a sensible way of doing things. And it's just another business model. It's really essentially a hybrid between a public utility and privatization of these opportunities. It's a way for communities to be the proponent.
Hi.
Are you saying that Niagara Falls is an endangered species?
I'm saying this is for new opportunities. These waterfalls are free-flowing right now, do not have hydro plants there. Okay? The difference, though, with Niagara Falls is that is a public utility. So when the public utility does well, we all benefit. All of Ontario benefits. If it were private, then the private corporation would share the benefits with their shareholders. Yes, sir.
Sean.
Okay, the local part is excellent, but from what you've learned here today, or come across today, would you think of incorporating this concept into what you're talking about?
I'm always open to change. I've been working at this for the better part of 7 years. It didn't start out like this. I've received pushback. I've taken a lot of abuse over the past 7 years. So I've had to answer a lot of questions that maybe I couldn't answer back then, that I can now. And I'm not married to this as a final product. And ultimately, if this Community Energy Act goes forward, it's going to go through the legislative process. It's going to go through committee. The public will have a comment period. But basically what I'm saying is we've got the opportunity to develop 50 regional community enterprises, one for each geographic region of the province. Those enterprises are open. Any member of the public can join by paying a nominal fee. That gives them the right to vote for the board of directors, and that gives them the right to raise their hand and raise a motion at an annual general meeting. It gives them the right to vote on the financial affairs of the corporation. Ultimately, they're the ones who control the final product. I'm just providing the roadmap as to how to get into the position to be in control of the opportunities so that you can assess them with a view to providing economic benefit to your community.
Eric, and then Liz.
So if I understand the existing system, the government is basically offering the land essentially free and then offering to pay for the electricity at the site, I should say. The site is free, they'll pay for electricity as a way to entice the investment of the capital to actually develop the generation, and that's sort of the payback. You come and pay to install it, and they will pay you a certain amount over X number of years for that. Now with your model,
just to answer, there is a small royalty paid by the corporation to the government.
But it's not what the site is worth.
It's nowhere near what it's worth.
Right. Token payment. So then, what you're suggesting is that the community would be receiving the electricity payments. They'd be receiving the income from the generation. Where would the capital be coming from to put it in? Would the community be basically borrowing the capital based on its future income stream? Because you're not a share-based
That's right.
model.
All the financing of this is done using debt, and that's why we would like the Community Energy Act brought out. It would put in place a loan guarantee program, two loan guarantee programs actually. One for the soft cost to do all the technical and economic evaluation, and the other would be a capital loan guarantee project. Once you have a shovel-ready project, you can go out and borrow money from institutional investors at the absolutely lowest possible rate because it's government-backed. But absolutely, it's debt finance. So then what happens is the project goes forward, starts producing electricity. That electricity is sold to the grid. By design, the feed-in tariff program is designed to create a profit or a surplus. And so that surplus then goes into a pot, which would then be available for community organizations to, a call would go out to community organizations for proposals. What do you need to make this community a better place to live? And there's money available for that. Thank you, Jeff.
Just a short mention, not even a question. I was about 2 years ago, so right after the crisis, 2008 crisis, at a meeting organized by German consulate about renewable energy, and I found some guy from a German bank who has a branch or something in New York City, and he was telling me, just find the projects, we have the money.
That's right. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of capital out there looking for a home. And if you have site control, if you have a power purchase agreement, if you've done all of your technical and economic feasibility studies, and you have the access to the grid, you have a bankable project. If you have a loan guarantee from the province, that just means it's that much more attractive for international investment to come in